So, Parashat Mishpatim, and in the Chumash, beginning on page 456. And there is absolutely some great stuff in Rashi for this week. In fact, I made a Reader's Digest condensed version of this as well to teach Shabbat morning. Okay. So, but you will already have gone over it, but that's okay. So, ve'ele hamishpatim asher tasim livnehem, and these are the laws or the ordinances asher tasim livnehem. Just briefly, you know that the rabbis divide biblical commandments into hukim and mishpatim, right? A chok is simply because God said so. A mishpat is a law that makes logical sense, okay? And if God hadn't ordained it, we might have ordained it for ourselves. Okay, and as you will see, I think really most of the laws here are in the realm of mishpatim. They're not ritual stuff. They're not. I mean, you know, of course, the question. I mean, everybody agrees that there are hukim and mishpatim, right? That doesn't mean that everybody agrees that any particular law is a hok or a mishpat. Right, just like everybody agrees there are 613 mitzvot, but no two lists of all of the 613 mitzvot are the same. Right, but this is not, you know, you can't wear a garment of linen and wool. Right, you can't eat camels. You know, the red heifer. Right, I mean the red heifer is like the classic hok. These are all criminal and civil laws. Okay, so ve'ele hamishpatim, and normally I would not even translate the vav as and, because I think it's just a stylistic thing. But here for Rashi, it's really important to translate the vav as and. Okay, ve'ele hamishpatim. Kol makom shene'amar ele pasal et harishonim ve'ele mosif al harishonim. What he's saying here is wherever it says ele as opposed to va'ele, it's a new subject. Okay, it's not connected to what was previously right before. All right, but where it says va'ele, it is connecting it to what went before. Okay?
So it's a true conjunction.
So it is indeed a true conjunction, correct. Ma harishonim misinai af elu misinai. All right, just as what went before, meaning the 10 Commandments, were given at Sinai, these also were given at Sinai. All right, so this is the second part is less important, but why does it connect essentially laws or criminal laws, criminal civil laws connected to the rules about the altar? Because if you remember, the very last thing in Parshat Yitro is not even the 10 Commandments, right? There's the 10 Commandments, and then you have rules about the construction of the altar. That it can't be of hewn stones, it has to be of whole stones. So that because if metal is used on the stones, they become profane, and also that the Kohanim should not go up via steps because it would reveal their nakedness. I mean, it has to do with, you know. So Rashi is saying is that this teaches you, I mean, essentially the Sanhedrin was in the temple. All right, and this is for Rashi the proof text as to why the Sanhedrin has to be in the temple. I'm not interested in that. I am more interested in the significance of Rashi saying, it says, Va ele hamishpatim, because the text wants you to understand that just as the Ten Commandments were given at Sinai, so this whole structure of civil and criminal law was also given at Sinai.
It originated from God.
Right. But it's very significant, right? Because to this day, look, I mean, you know, if I had $1 for every congregant in my 36-year rabbinic career, 35,
Okay.
if I had $1 for every congregant or constituent over my 35-year rabbinic career who said to me, well, I believe that the Ten Commandments were given at Sinai, but not all the rest of this stuff, I wouldn't be rich, but I could buy myself a nice meal.
Oh, I'm sure you could.
Right? And so Rashi is attacking that view. I mean, I know I discussed it in my drasha last Shabbat when I said that the reason that the sages took the Ten Commandments out of the daily recitation of the Ten Commandments out of the Siddur was precisely to combat the heretical notion that only the Ten Commandments were revealed at Sinai and not the entire Torah. Okay? And that's what Rashi is saying here. Okay, so this is actually like a very foundational Rashi for understanding the rabbinic approach to divinely given law. Okay. Asher tasim lifnehem, which you shall set before them. All right, so God is saying to Moses, right? So these are the laws which you shall set before them. Okay. God's saying to Moses, don't say it's enough, you know, I'll teach them until they know it well as it was taught, but I will not trouble myself to enable them to understand the reason for the matter and its explanation. Okay? In other words, no, asher tasim liflehem k'shulchan ha'aruch, as a set table, u'muchan la'achol lifnei ha'adam, that is placed before somebody. But notice that phrase, the set table, Shulchan Aruch, right? Shulchan Aruch is one of the, it is, at least in Orthodox Judaism, the most authoritative code, right? So Rashi is, and again, this is kind of foundational. Rashi is saying that it's not enough to simply teach them Chumash. You can't teach them Chumash. You also have to teach them Talmud and codes.
You need to understand.
Right? You need to understand the reasonings and the explanation. Right? Which is absolutely true. I mean, and that's the whole genesis of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Right? Because you cannot understand what is Jewish practice simply based on the written text of the Torah, right? I mean, you know, we could come up with a million examples, right? But where in the Torah does it say to light Shabbat candles? Nowhere, right? As an example, right? So that's what you shall set before them like the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, lifneihem. Velo lifnei goyim, not you shall set before them meaning Israel, but not Gentiles. V'afilu yadata badin achad shehem danim oto kedinei Yisrael al taviehu b'archaot shelahem. Even if you know that the Gentiles judge a certain law similarly to the laws of Israel, do not bring it to their courts. שהמביא דיני ישראל לפני גויים מחלל את השם ומייקר שם עבודה zara lahachshiva. All right, if you bring Jewish lawsuits before Gentiles, you profane God's name and honors the name of the idols, the Gentile gods. When we let our enemies judge us, this is testimony to our esteem of their deity. Okay, now again, this is a basic halacha, right? It says archaot, right? It is forbidden under halacha for a Jew to bring another Jew to a Gentile court. Okay, I don't know if you're aware of that, but
no, this is interesting.
Right.
I'm thinking of what you do and.
Well, all right. So here's what you do. Here's what the law is. The law is that you have some sort of commercial dispute with a fellow Jew. Okay, I don't know. You bought a used car from another Jew, and they hid from you the fact that it was a lemon, and you want to sue them.
Mm-hmm.
It is forbidden under halacha for you to bring them to the civil courts of the state of Maryland. You have to bring them to a Beit Din. Okay, now, a Beit Din has no legal authority in this country, right? So, I don't know, who are you suing? Give me a name of somebody you're suing.
Okay.
Harry.
Harry, okay.
Okay, you're suing Harry Cohen, right? So you go to a Beit Din, and it could be like a established Beit Din, or you could come to me and I could get 3 rabbis to constitute a Beit Din, right? And then they summon Harry Cohen to the Beit Din. It's called a zimun, right? And if Harry Cohen agrees, all right, then what you will both do is sign a mediation and arbitration agreement, okay? And then it's just like going to any other arbitration, right? And if you sign an arbitration agreement that says we both voluntarily agree to submit this case to the arbitration of this tribunal rather than going through the civil court system, then it's enforceable.
Okay.
All right, and then if you should win and Harry doesn't pay you, you can then go to the court to have the judgment executed.
You
can go to a civil court to have it executed because it's a legally valid arbitration agreement. Now, if we summon Harry Cohen and he refuses to appear, okay, we have to go through certain process of, trying to convince him, right? But he flatly refuses to appear. Then the Beit Din will give you permission to go to civil court.
Okay. So the first step is to go through the Beit Din.
First step is to go to the Beit Din. Okay, now
I always wondered how that worked.
And for example, in the conservative movement, all rabbinic and cantorial contracts have a clause that in the event of a dispute between the rabbi or the cantor and the congregation, we submit it to arbitration under the auspices of the United Synagogue, not to civil court. Okay, and in fact, I did have a dispute with my previous congregation. All right, and I can't tell you the result. Okay. All right, because we both signed a confidentiality agreement. Okay, I will tell you that both at the end of the process, both of us were unhappy, which, as the mediator said, that means it was a true compromise. if they're both
They're
unhappy.
unhappy.
Okay. But okay, this also has implications for how an observant Jew practices law.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you are, as a Jew, are not allowed to help another Jew break the law. All right, so you want to sue Harry Cohen, right? And you want to sue him. You don't know anything about this Beit Din stuff. You're not interested. You go to an attorney. Let's call him Alan Katz, right?
Happens to be an attorney.
Right? And you say, Alan, I want you to sue Harry for me. Okay, what Alan is supposed to do is try to convince you to go to a Beit Din. Okay, but if you refuse and insist on going to civil court, what do you think Alan is supposed to do?
He's supposed to withdraw from the case.
No, he can take the case, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because of the principle that's known as two banks of the river. Okay, and I'll explain to you what that is. Right? A Nazarite is not allowed to have wine. Right? So, my friend Fred the Nazarite says to me, hey, Charlie, hand me that cup of wine. Am I allowed to hand him the cup of wine or not? Okay, the answer is, if the cup of wine is on the other bank of the stream and he can't get it himself, I'm not allowed to hand it to him. If the wine is, let's say we're 20 feet away and the wine is 5 feet from me and 15 feet from him, I can hand him the wine. Right? Because if I say no, he can get it himself. Right? So you have asked a Jewish attorney to file suit against a fellow Jew in a civil court. If they say no, are you going to be precluded from filing the suit? No. You'll go find another attorney.
I see. Yeah.
Okay? So your attorney is not helping you to commit a sin that you would otherwise be unable to commit.
I get it.
Okay? But this is very, very interesting stuff. But that prohibition on against a Jew suing another Jew in archaot, in civil court, and of course it says Gentile court. Now of course that's also interesting because, I would maintain, and I've spoken about this in various Divrei Torah and Shiurim over the years, that the situation of American Jews is halachically a novum, right? When you think of how many Jews are attorneys, how many Jews are judges.
Unheard of in
right?
old Europe.
Unheard of in old Europe, exactly, right? So, but nevertheless, even though it may be a legal system that is substantially administered by Jews,
it's still the civil.
It's still, right, the civil. And here Rashi is prescient because he says, even if their laws are the same as ours, right? Which is pretty much the case. I mean, I don't think that in most civil cases that you would bring to a Beit Din, you would get a different result than if you went to a civil court.
Probably not.
Right? I mean,
right.
There are the one area that I can think of where halakha differs from civil law is in the question of competition,
Well, that's interesting.
right? I mean, there's this concept of hasagat gvul, right? Where like, let's say
Well,
you,
there was a case here when Shalom took over the old Giants, or the Magruders in
right,
Camp Mill. Shaul's butcher shop, kosher, was right in. It was just a couple doors
oh, was
down,
it? Yeah.
and that did go to a big den. And
Okay.
I think it got resolved.
It got resolved, obviously, because
Yeah.
they opened there.
They opened there, and the other one went out of business.
Right. But that's exactly that. So, like, if I own a kosher pizza shop, and you want to open, right? So let's say we're in Kemp Mill, right? And I have a pizza shop on one side, and you want to open up a pizza shop across the parking lot. The VOD is not supposed to agree to allow you to do that. Whereas in civil law, that would be considered restraint of trade.
Right. And that is, and pretty much that's how that
Right.
issue came up. The show had changed hands just shortly before this occurred.
Right.
And so the agreement was that the employees of the smaller store, Shalom hired them.
All right. You know what? I'm going to skip some stuff.
Okay.
And if we have more time at the end, I'll come back to it. Okay? But it's my class, so I get
of course, you get
to teach what I find most interesting.
Right. Well.
All right. So let's look now at the bottom of page 3. Okay. All right. 21:18. And if men quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with a fist, and he does not die, but is confined to his bed, right? Two men have a fight, right? And you injure but don't kill. You injure but don't kill. Okay? If men quarrel, why was this said? Since it says an eye for an eye, we learn only that if one assaults his fellow, he must pay the value of his limbs, which he amputated or rendered permanently useless, but payment for idleness and healing we have not yet learned. Therefore, this section which delineates these payments was stated. Okay. All right. Now, we haven't gotten exactly to that, but there is, I mean, and if we get there, when we read an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and so on and so forth, right? The way the rabbinic system understands that is compensation, right? In other words, and it's, I mean, the way it's done is kind of foreign to us, right? Because we live in a different society, but the principles are not that different. In other words, so let's say, somebody tortiously causes me to have a limb amputated, right? So we would evaluate, okay, if this person was a slave and was sold with all 4 limbs intact, how much would they be worth, right? And now, how much is he worth minus the limb, okay? And the difference is the compensation that's owed. Having said that, I mean, what do we do now? We sort of figure out loss of earnings, right? It's more or less the same thing. It's more or less the same thing. But Rashi says, so you might say, okay, I injured the guy, I hurt him, and he was laid up in bed for a few days. He didn't lose his hand, he didn't lose his arm, he didn't lose his leg, he didn't lose a teeth. I don't owe him anything. Okay? No. You have to pay his idleness, shevet, right? You have to pay, right? And again, this is, I mean, the same in civil law, right? I mean, lost wages, right? Right? If you injure another
Mhm.
person and they can't work for a month, they're entitled to recover the lost wages, right? And also to pay for his healing. Okay. Now, of course, as I said in my weekly drasha, this is also the basis of the permission to engage in medicine in the first place, right? Because, there's certainly, Christian scientists say, right, you're sick because God made you sick.
God will make you better.
God will make you better if God wants you to get better.
Right.
And if God doesn't want you to get better, you won't get better, right? But who is a human being to interfere? No. Because the Torah, since the Torah explicitly says, if you injure another person, you got to pay their doctor's bills. So if the Torah says you got to pay the doctor's bills, stands to reason that it's okay to be a doctor.
Right,
because the Torah wouldn't.
It wouldn't say you have to pay the healer.
Right. If it was not for. All right. And if he gets up and walks about, on his support, on his cane, the assailant shall be cleared. He shall give payment for enforced idleness, and he shall provide for his cure. Right? So the assailant shall be cleared. Now, would it enter your mind that one who did not kill should be killed? Right? But rather, the Torah teaches you here that they imprison him until it becomes apparent whether the victim will get well. And this is its meaning. Right? When he gets up and walks, then the assailant is cleared, but not until then. Right? That's it. It's almost like, I guess, preventive detention, right? Yeah. I injured somebody. I'm not sure why that's strictly necessary, but I guess they didn't have ankle bracelets or
keep track
what have you.
It could easily escape.
Right. So it's preventive detention, which I guess we still do. In a way, if you can't afford cash bail, I'm going to go get myself a bottle of water. Okay. I'll be right back. Sorry for the delay.
You should get it before.
Yeah, I forgot. All right, so here at the top of 5, and actually they're using a slightly different system. All right, payment for his enforced idleness. Bitul melachto Michamat haholi, right? Literally the cancellation of his work because of his illness, right? If he cut off his hand or his foot, we assess payment for the idleness as if he were a watchman of a cucumber field, because even after recovery from the illness, he is not fit for work that requires a hand or foot. And he already gave him as payment for his damage the value of his hand and his foot. Okay? And he shall provide for his cure. As the Targum says, he shall pay the physician's fee. Okay, so you get essentially both. You get compensation for the loss of the limb, and you get compensation for your inability to work, but at the level of a watchman of a cucumber field. Okay, shomer kishulin. That's probably not a high status, well-paying
Let's put it
profession.
this way, sort of, right? Exactly. It's not cause of subsistence pay or something.
Right.
Like that.
I'm not sure exactly what a shomer kishulin made, but it probably wasn't
right.
a lot. Okay. Now.
Not a skilled job.
All right. 21:22. V'chi yinatsu anashim v'nagfu isha hara v'yatsu yaladeha v'lo ye'ason. Right? If men quarrel and hit a pregnant woman and the she miscarries, yatsu yaladeha, literally the children, actually, it's in the plural, came out. V'lo ye'ason, but there is no disaster, disaster. Anosh ye'anesh, he shall surely be punished. Kasher yashit alav bal ha'isha, he shall be punished as the husband of the woman demands of him, venatan biflilin, according to the judge's orders. Okay. Should men quarrel? Right? This Rashi is making clear that this is accidental. The two men are struggling, right? And not even tries to. She's just there. However, right? But the men didn't. I mean, it was intentional in the sense that the fight was intentional.
With the two men, but
right.
Happened to her?
What happened to her was unintentional. Right. All right. And then he says nakfu. He's explaining what negifa means. It's pushing and striking. Okay. But v'lo ye'ason ba'isha. There is no fatality with the woman. Okay, he translates this as a son fatality. Let me look at our other translation. No other damage ensues. Okay, I think an accurate translation is somewhere between these two, actually. Because ason doesn't mean fatality necessarily; it means a tragedy, right? That's
an accident or something, but it doesn't mean a death necessarily.
I don't think it necessarily means a death. Yeah. Okay.
It's a tragedy for us because she loses baby.
Right. But the point is that. He shall surely be punished. All right, I'll go on and then I'll come back. All right. To pay the value of the fetuses to the husband. They assess her as if she was a pregnant slave, being sold, etc. Okay. He shall surely be punished. They shall collect monetary punishment. He shall give restitution according to the judges. Okay. The point is, I said, well, let's go on to the next verse because it's connected to.
Okay.
Okay. But if there is a fatality, you shall give a life for a life. Ve'im ason yeh v'natata nefesh tachat nefesh. Ve'im ason yeh ba'isha, with the woman. Okay, so what this is saying is, if a man accidentally causes a woman to miscarry, he is fined. If the woman herself dies, it is life for life, without getting into what that means, right? But the point is, and this is the locus classicus for the halachic perspective that a fetus is not a full human being.
Right.
Right? Because we don't, I mean, if you look at the Code of Hammurabi, homicide is punished according to the relative status of the assailant and the victim. In the Torah, that's not the case. I mean, there are exceptions if you're dealing with a slave. Okay, but if you're dealing with homicide between two Hebrews, status doesn't matter. You don't get fined for killing another person, right? You don't even get fined for accidentally killing another person. You have to flee to the city of refuge, right? So the logical inference is that killing a fetus is not homicide. It's feticide. Feticide, now, it's not nothing, right? And we live in such a polarized society, right? And on this particular issue, the polarization did not start in 2016. It started whenever Roe v. Wade, in the 73, okay. You know, where you have one side that is just, it's murder, and the other side that says it's nothing at all.
Well, neither side.
Right.
Neither extreme.
Right. The Torah doesn't say it's nothing at all.
It does not.
Right? The Torah doesn't say it's nothing at all. It is a matter that is punished, but it's punished by a fine. Right, so it is something that is taken seriously, but it's not murder, right? And there's no warrant whatsoever from Exodus for considering abortion to be murder, because a fetus is not a full human being. All right, and I mean, I don't see how you can read this text in any other way.
Agreed.
Right.
Because I think some of your drashas over the years, I think you've talked about this.
Right. Now, having said that, the Septuagint of this text is different. Okay, and now I don't know Greek, but I believe that the word "son," which we understand as like a tragedy, meaning the woman dies, right? That in the Septuagint it says, if the fetus has no form, then he's not punished, right? In other words, right, and we know, I mean, there are developmental stages, right? And so that the Septuagint seems to say that if one causes an abortion, and the fetus is sort of like visibly has a human form, then it's life for life, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so they have a leg to stand on, right? Because the Septuagint is the Bible of the early church.
That's right.
Right? And
I just talked about that this morning.
oh, okay, right. And
and
you know, to my knowledge, and again, I know this only from secondary literature, but you know, in every case where there's a divergence between the Masoretic reading and the Septuagint reading, Paul goes with the Septuagint reading. Okay, I am personally convinced that Paul didn't even know Hebrew.
I think that's very. To me, that's a reasonable assumption.
Right, and that his Bible was the Septuagint, not the Tanakh.
Right, but the problem comes in. So some examples were given in the class this morning where you have multiple Hebrew words that describe different degrees, but the Greek doesn't.
Right.
So so who did the translation? The Greek word that was doesn't accurately. Right,
but what it also, all right, and you and Gail have both heard me speak about this. You know, probably 10% of my Shabbat morning drashot are on the evils of mistranslation. Right. You know, but people think that translation is a simple matter.
It is not.
It is not. It is not. And many of the divergent ways that Christians and Jews read Scripture is rooted in the fact that the Septuagint and the Hebrew text disagree.
Yeah.
Right. Now, which is more? Whatever. I don't know, and I can't go into it. But it is literally a matter of translation. It is literally a matter of translation. Okay. So, bottom of page 6. If there is a fatality with the woman, v'natata nefesh tachat nefesh. Okay. Our sages disagree on this matter. Rabbeinu cholkin badavar. Yesh omrim nefesh mamash, v'yesh omrim mamon, aval lo nefesh mamash. So there are those who say nefesh mamash, that he should be put to death. All right, it's life for life. He shall be put to death. And there are others who say no, that this is monetary compensation, but not put him to death. All right. Shahamitkaven laharog et zeh v'harag et zeh patur mimita u'mishalem liyorshav damav kamo shahaya nimkar b'shuk. Right, because if one intends to kill one person and kills another, he's exempt from the death penalty and must pay the compensation. Right, the loss of value as if he were a slave. Right, and this is that, right? In other words, I may have intended to kill the guy that I was fighting with, but I didn't intend to kill your wife. And in that sense, it's accidental homicide, right? I didn't intend to kill her.
Yeah.
Right now, in common law, that would still be felony murder. Right, because you committed an accidental homicide in the course of committing another crime. Right, so here is an example where biblical law and common law diverge from each other. Right, but in biblical law, I killed a person other than the person I intended to kill. I am not liable to be put to death. I simply have to pay compensation to the heirs. Okay. Eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. Eye for an eye. If a person blinds his neighbor's eye, he must give him the value of his eye, which is how much is priced to be sold in the marketplace, has decreased without the eye. So is the meaning of all of them, but not the actual amputation of a limb, as our rabbis interpreted in the chapter HaChovel, which is in Baba Kama, he who assaults. Okay. So we have compensation, right? So when, and I have to say that this verse is a classic source for Christian anti-Judaism.
Oh, I remember as a kid, the kids going to the next building, who went to a Catholic school. You believe in an eye for an eye, among other little.
Right. And even Martin Luther King, right, who, and in a certain way, it's almost like endemic to Christianity. Right, even Martin Luther King, who was certainly not an anti-Semite, but he, a famous statement: "An eye for an eye leaves everybody blind." Right, that we have to move beyond that to an ethos of love. That may be the way the Christians read it. It's not the way the rabbis read it. Right? I mean, an eye for an eye does not leave everybody blind. It only leaves one person blind.
Right.
Right, and it leaves the other person poorer. Right, but we do not talk about, actual amputation of the limb, whether it's an eye, hand, foot, as opposed. And again, I'm not even going to go there because I don't know enough about Islamic law to say. Right, I mean, we certainly read cases where under Sharia courts, thieves literally have their hands cut off. But I don't really know if that's normative or.
But you do this in the case of the extreme.
Right, or really an extreme, and and these stories are promoted to to cause anti-Islamic feeling. Okay. Now, a burn for a burn. Now, here essentially Rashi is saying that in this case, a burn, there's actually no diminished ability, right? If you get, but it's very painful. Right. Now, of course, we actually know differently, right? I mean, people can really get burned and not be able to do things that they were done before. But Rashi is saying it's not merely the case that you are compensated for your lost value, right? You're also compensated for the pain
and suffering.
Okay. How much they compute how much money a person like him would be willing to take to endure such pain. All right.
Well,
and
how do you do that?
Well, I don't know. You see, because you're not a guy, right? I mean, guys, we do this, right? How especially like teenagers or adolescents, right? How much would you give me if I did, man, you could figure it out.
Growing up.
You could figure it out. You could figure it out. How much would you need to agree to endure this? Okay. All right. Wound. So Rashi here is saying, and we saw this before, that if you cause somebody to lose a limb, there are two different forms of compensation that you have to pay, right? You have to pay the loss of value or the loss of earning power, et cetera, but you also have to pay the pain and suffering, right? So Rashi is saying that, we do not exempt him from payment for the victim. Paying reason is since he, the assailant, purchased the victim's hand by giving the victim payment for its value, he may amputate it with whatever he wants. We say, however, that he should amputate it with a medication that lessens the pain. However, if he cut it off with an iron implement and caused him pain, he must give the victim compensation. Right? Again, we don't have to, go into the specific details, but the point is that it's not merely compensation for loss of earnings, it's also compensation for pain and suffering. Gail, did you have something you want to say? Hold on a second, I gotta unmute you. No, you got to unmute yourself. I can't. Nobody can hear you.
There.
Okay. There you
I
go.
was saying that, yeah, it's interesting that they do include the pain and suffering as well as the loss of the limb itself. It's cool. Am I muted still?
No, you're not muted. I just heard you. I heard everything.
Oh, okay.
You said. Yeah. No, it is. And I mean, so in this case, Rashi, and this is all, I mean, this is not just Rashi, because this is all based on the Gemara, right? So in this sense, Judaic law going back 2,000 years or almost is very similar to, common law as we understand it, where you are compensated, right? Not merely for loss of earning, but also for pain and suffering. All right, so good stuff. I think we didn't do everything, but we did a lot. And like I said, I mean, some of these things are sort of like very, very classic stuff that's kind of basic to the understanding of certain halachot. Questions? Gail, Ricardo, you good? All right. Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. A day early.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, ending a little bit early.
Yeah, 5
All right.
minutes early.
All right. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.